Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand here to debate the motion, this House will set up legal pathways across the Mediterranean to ensure the safety of potential immigrants. And I stand here proud to propose this motion. In my speech today, I'm going to start with defining the case, presenting a model for how this would take place, and then presenting two main arguments. The argument of why this is a humane and morally right thing to do, and how this would lead to a more institutionalized and effective way of dealing with immigrants that comes across the Mediterranean Sea. Now, to first off start with definition, what would we define as legal pathways, and how this is legal pathways is well, exactly what it says to me. Methods of human transport that are not breaking any sort of law when they try to enter into other sovereign nations, which will later be detailed on in our model, and exactly how we're going to promote this. And these legal pathways, how they would be set up by any sort of international organization that has efficient means to be able to transport them in a way that also does not offend their sort of human rights, that they sort of ship in boxes, so to speak. And potential immigrants is, well, literally potential immigrants, but primarily we're targeting potential asylum seekers, more because of the reasoning that normal immigrants, so to speak, that apply for visa in their own country and then want to move into sort of Central Europe, generally don't need to use cross-Mediterraneans like boats and the sort of illegal systems of transport that we are worried about the safety of, because they can generally travel using normal means, so to speak. Yeah, moving on to our model, how would we do this? What we are proposing here is to set up an international refugee, a sort of international refugee camp, somewhere along the Mediterranean, that does not intrude upon the sovereignty of any nation, so that we're not shipping immigrants directly into nations. What we're going to ship them to is a sort of centralized immigration camp where we can promotionally, where we can promotionally help them to, first of all, deal with their asylum-seeking issues, where we can say that, okay, we're giving them the potentiality of seeking asylum in Europe, but also to say that, because before I would have as a problem is that we are transporting people directly into nations, and they have to know that. Yeah.
Okay, but how is it like, where is that magic island that doesn't belong to any country yet?
Well, there's always space. There's always space. There is always that. This is no, thank you, sir. I mean, for a more detailed reason, I think a lot of nations who have sections of lands that are not occupied would be rather happy to say that, okay, we can actually host this camp here to ensure that they do not actually have a lot of illegal immigrants coming into their nations and causing them technical issues. They would probably say that, okay, if you can have set up a system, as long as you're willing to deal with it, they will be willing to actually surrender a small piece of land or a small island somewhere to help with this issue. And no, thank you, sir. And secondly, why we're willing to promote this, we'll continue on with how this will lead to a more efficient method of immigration. But first of all, moving on to my main argument, which is about how humane this is. A lot of you know about, heard about the recent disaster in Italy, where people die due to the fact that the methods they try to use to cross the Mediterranean Sea is not commercially safe. They ship them. There is no guarantee that the methods that people use, that the people who want to transport them across the sea, that their sort of vessels, their crafts are any sort of safe, because people are desperate. They want to come across. There is no viable option. They will take anything that's available to them. And first of all, we have the safety of their measurement. I mean, for all we know, for all the people that they're placing their trust in us, that they can simply, I mean, the boat doesn't even have to be able to float, for all they know. So, I mean, first of all, we're promoting the safety that they're not dying because of some technical detail, like they're sinking across the sea. And secondly, well, we want to literally try to kill off what we all know as human smuggling, the very inhumane way that people are transported, literally transported in boxes across the borders to ensure that, I'll take it in a minute, literally transported across in boxes to ensure that they can get in to somewhere which they feel is safer, while they potentially have the risk of dying along along the way. Yes, sir?
Would you accept economic refugees on those boats?
First of all, refugees. We're talking about immigration. Our main source is that, considering the way we present our models, we have a section of land that you're being transferred to. Anyone is eligible to use this system, but they are not guaranteed to actually get into a nation, because the nation will then have to apply their asylum seeking issues. If you have an economic refugee that perhaps that the nation will not feel like, okay, we don't want them here, the nations of Europe have a right to deny them the right to then enter the country. No thank you. No thank you. But thank you. And secondly, moving on to my second argument, moving away from this, how will this promote a more efficient method of immigration? It's a very rather simple method, so to speak. That the way that things are happening now, you have human smuggling. They come in. We have no set amount of how many people are actually being transported in. We are sort of trusting immigration to catch the people that are being forced to smuggled into the nation. What we want to do is try to somehow make it clear. We will have a setting up. We will have an organization dealing with it. We will actually have at least a higher number of knowledgeable. We know who we're transporting in. We also then have actually a more efficient way of kicking them out, so to speak. We will want to reduce the problem of having illegal immigrants by having a more efficient way of them being transported to a specific sort of refugee camp where they will be helped to apply for asylum. Now they will also have the potential to seek asylum across all of Europe instead of only the nation that they are being transported into. And then so to speak, that there will be a more statistical measure, where they will be more easily classified, and we will have a more easy system of knowing who's being transported in and who's being able to transport out. And for these reasons, for the humane reasons, and for the way to promote more safer immigration, we will stand proud to propose.
So we hear from the government side a fake version of humanism. Let's feel good about ourselves without actually solving any problems we've heard on this side. We believe the problem we're facing in the European Union is misframed and miscategorized if we say it's only about the horrible shipping conditions when getting over to the European Union. What we believe is the problem on opposition side is horrible life conditions, be it economically or the personal safety. In those countries, people pushed and attracted to the EU and at the same time rejected because the EU has a strong stance against immigration. All of those problems you might notice not tackled at all by the policy that they're proposing. What we're going to show you today is why it in fact will even make things worse for countries. So that's our burden today. First some rebuttal, then I'll go into our arguments in itself. So first of all, they talk about the normal immigrants, but are a bit fluffy on economic immigrants. They say like, well, we don't know, they can apply, but let's see what happens then. Okay, so first of all, I'd say there's a significant amount of people who are economic refugees, who seek refugee in those countries for economic reasons, or at least to a large amount for economic reasons. As you will see, that unfortunately quite a lot of people who seek asylum are denied by many European countries, simply because it often does not hold place. Then, second of all, they say we need to first transport them on an island. Very centralized, isolated. First, let me explain a bit about their model, and you can ask about mine. So this is like a centralized camp, which, like, first of all, especially as a German, doesn't sound very nice. But okay, so not in any country, apparently, even though countries need to give up space. So that means, first of all, countries need to give up some sovereignty over their country, which they probably would like. Second of all, they would have people in there. Apparently, but that's not what you want. You say, like, some desolate island close by. So what do desolate islands close by mean? That means isolation from society in the first place. And even if it's just a camp on the countryside, that still means total isolation of the people from being in any contact with other Europeans. It means probably spread of illness, because usually those are very, well, not usually meant for a long habitation, but as you point out yourself, it takes 1 or 2 years or longer, probably longer if we attract more people to use this option, staying in those camps. So it's probably not very healthy. And second of all, no real economic possibilities for those people to develop themselves, because they're completely detached from all society surrounding them. So they probably lead a rather miserable life in the first place and have a really hard time getting in. What he never explains, why it is so damn important to have those people on European land in the first place, to then reject them. Apparently that's like the key improvement of their policy, that we get more people into Europe so that we can then judge them and send them back. If that's his point, I don't quite get how he doesn't propose any measure of having easier visa applications or easier systems where people can apply from a different country, from abroad, from their country of origin, and then be judged more fairly. And that will be our proposition. We are going to be very, very strict on any illegal border controls. If you're an illegal migrant, we stick to the current policy that yes, you will be denied. And yes, that is extremely unfortunate, and we think that's a shame that so many people die, but that's not simply because of the missing pathway, but of the general economic conditions. What we want to make it easier to apply for visas, seek asylum, become easier, and grant it more often to people from war zones. We believe that those people who live under dire situations should be more likely and more able to get into the country, but for this process, and that's something that you would need to prove us, why is it so much important to get them in the country in the first place to then reject them? I'll take closing.
Now, do you recognise that there might be a slight difficulty to just walk over to an embassy in Syria and apply for a visa there? Do you not think that the fact that there's a civil war going on makes that slightly difficult?
Sure, it makes it slightly difficult, but I guess it's also slightly difficult from Syria to migrate to Libya for another conflict zone, then get to the border, hire a smuggling person, and then go over to the country. So apparently they are able to handle those difficulties. Second point, if they manage to go to another country, which is probably safer in the first place, then probably they can seek those embassies in the first place. And what we don't reject, and what we think is a reasonable idea, to have in those border areas, say in Northern Africa, more European presence and more accessibility and more availability to apply for a visa there. We think that's perfectly reasonable and fine. What they need to explain is why we can get over. So probably what they're going to say, I'll take you later. What they then say is probably something along the lines, yeah, but people are going to do it anyway, and with our system at least, we get them into some sort of like fair way of doing it. So, okay, sounds interesting in the first place. But let's think about what that means. So first of all, if you have a really good chance of getting into the country anyway, then that works under our model, and it works even better, because you first apply, and then when you're secure that you're actually allowed to get into the country, you can do it, and you don't need to take that danger. What's more likely is that people who know right beforehand that they will never be accepted as a legal migrant because simply the reasons for which they migrate are not considered like a war crime or constant oppression, but economic reasons which are not accepted by the European Union. The effect on those people will be minimal under their policies because they know that they're illegal, and their goal is never to simply get over to Europe and then live in illegal migration camps under horrible conditions. Their goal is to get into Europe and then live and work there because they dream of a better life. And we believe they have every right to dream of a better life, but your version simply condemns them to a horrible situation. So that we don't think they'll choose that. What they'll still choose is any options to illegally get into the country and any options to circumvent your model and your system. So we still have the problem of human trafficking, we still have the problem of smuggling, which is not really solved at all. So, okay, but let's go into some substantive after ripping this apart, sorry. First of all, what effect does it have on people? We might assume that it might encourage them in the first place. Because what you actively say is that you as a state promote illegal immigration over the Mediterranean Sea. Of course you might say it's still illegal, it's still bad, we're putting them in camps, but you're saying that we think it's a valid option and we should try to protect you as much as possible. What that sends out as a state is an official symbol, an official idea that yes, we think this is a reasonable approach, yes, you should do it, and yes, we're worried about your safety and try to promote you in as safe passage as possible. What does that lead to? Probably to more migration. If you already point out that people in those centers barely can handle it, it already takes 1 to 2 years, there's already a strong conflict in the European Union, I'm not sure why it would be in your interest to then have more illegal immigrants coming over, worsening the situations for them. Second point would be, if it's safer, it unfortunately also becomes more attractive. And I hope you bash me on that because that's a horribly moral stance to take. But you could say that if it becomes safer, and if it becomes easier to cross the border, the chance and the motivation of people to actually do cross and to actually get over becomes bigger, and people will have a higher motivation to do so. And I'm going to explain in my second speech why that's a bad idea, because that encourages illegal immigration instead of improving the situation in the country itself. So for all these reasons, we beg you to propose.
Now let's reconsider, firstly, who these immigrants that we are caring for the safety of. These are the immigrants that we see who are crossing by boat, by means of transportation that are that put them at great risk of their lives. And we need to consider why are they doing this? What are their options in their home countries? If they are legally asylum seekers or immigrants for that matter, why are they considering this option? Now, in our proposal, we propose a model of a center, an island that could be used, could be sold for this use, and we use it as a safe haven for those who are seeking legal asylum. Now, a first point of rebuttal I would like to make is that even if it would attract, even if they would attract more people to go through this way, Per has mentioned that they would still get try to get means of illegal passages. It would not stop illegal immigration. But the main focus here, we would say, is that we're saving lives. We're preventing individuals from crossing greater distances and at greater risk. And so we would like to add that having this center greatly reduces the risk of those people who try to cross. And then another rebuttal to Per's model is that even if you set up greater or more extensive passages in their home countries, people are not convinced that their claims would be processed in an orderly manner, because there are thousands of people in the queue. They would be waiting for maybe 20 years to be able to get their claims heard. I've heard of stories where, in refugee camps in Cambodia or in Indonesia, where people have been there for 20 years. According to their model, well, let's ease it up there, but people are, if you're number 100,000 person to be processed, is this a legitimate option for you, or would you rather seek alternative ways that might be more risky? We call on this model, I'll take you later. We allow this model because, firstly, we would like to accept those who are legally refugees, for instance. But we do not deny nation states to be able to rebuff those that they don't see as legitimate immigrants or refugees. Now, a substantive point that I would like to make is what is really at risk behind this. And one of the key arguments I would say is the integrity of the Refugee Convention. Because, let's face it, the number of refugees around the world is ever increasing. And when people are getting really desperate to get across through risky modes of transformation, there's another way to solve this problem, which is to entirely restrict who can come in Europe. And that is a great risk. That is an alternative option that we don't want to take. We want to still carry on accepting legal refugees. And we need to point out why this convention and why its eligibility for refugees is important, because during times of war and suffering, people have been turned back from safe havens, and they themselves have been marooned at sea, for instance, there was a Jewish ship that was boarded into America to escape Nazi Germany, and they were turned back by many countries because there was no convention to support them, and eventually they were marooned at sea, and they were unfortunately their lives were lost. And so we view this as a legitimate option against an alternative of entirely inhumane disallowance or discrediting of refugees worldwide. Now that's one argument, and as I mentioned before, as mentioned by my colleague before, the the formal passage is also an important factor, because I think an important part of sovereignty is territorial integrity, which is to secure your borders. And to be able to control the flow of migration in your country is very important. Now, through this passage, we hope that we can know who's coming in and out of our country more, and that we don't jeopardize people's lives because of it. And for all these reasons, I'm proud to close. Thank you.
So, we've not heard that much about my points, but I'm still going to answer what we've heard here on this side. What we believe on your position is that, yes, migration might be justified and necessary in specific cases, and then you should have every right. But we also believe that national borders should be secured, as you point out, and there should be integrity in those borders, but they're best achieved by having strict border controls and not encouraging further illegal immigration. So this will be the points we're talking about. We're talking about what happens when people actually arrive here. Do we want to encourage illegal immigration? And because is this illegal immigration happening better for those people and for the economies of the countries where those people come from? So does it actually improve their lives, and is it something we should encourage? And we don't think so. Before that, some rebuttal to what we've heard here. So you say that those people cross by boats and they want to risk their lives. And our goal is now to save more lives. But then you have a very good line of reasoning. You say that if there's too many claims, there are too many people around there, and then they want to take risks, they want to take extreme measures, and they're afraid of being rejected. They're very afraid of being in a bad situation. That equally applies to your newly created, massively overpopulated island next to the coast of Europe, where apparently more people will go only to know that they're fairly likely to be rejected. What we already pointed out as our countermodel is that for people with very legitimate claims, because they're a war-torn country with strong problems and strong risks, that we want to encourage those people by having a larger amount of people we let into the country. That's something we tolerate through a normal, regular process where people then can regularly cross over through actual European marine. So that's totally okay, and we believe that's totally justified. If every European country behaved like Sweden, we could probably help this problem. But as you say, people who know that we will be rejected, like the vast majority of all economic refugees, know under your model, as well as under the status quo, that they probably will be rejected on that island, and they probably need to take very strong risks to not be captured, to not go through this legal procedure, and take other measures. You point out they will take every risk. We believe that doesn't stop smuggling, that doesn't stop human trafficking. People will still try to avoid coastal patrol, still try to find sneaky ways into the country if they know that they will be rejected. And many of them are perfectly aware that this is exactly what will happen. So we don't really feel that helps. What makes it even worse is that if at least you get rejected in your home country, you have the possibility then to continue working. You stay with your family, you stay within economic circumstances and your social boundaries, and at least while you know that you will be rejected, you might be able to lead a fulfilling life, which you might suffer and you might be poor, and that's right. But we believe that this suffering, this poorness, is probably a lot better than what you expect Europe to be. Because the image of the European Union outside of it is significantly better than what actually happens to people when they come over as illegal immigrants. Because what you've never really touched upon on this side is, will you improve their situations? Will they be able to work? Will they be able to have any chance of integration? Will they be able to have any chance of leading more fulfilling lives? And we don't think that if that is tackled at all, if there's any significant change, that only leads to more people people coming over and then living in situations which are probably significantly worse for them than they are currently right now. That holds equally true for people, for example, migrating to Northern Africa first to then cross over the border. If you read, for example, if you read, for example, articles about people who first go to Libya and then work there to earn money to travel over the coast and flee to Europe, at least what that points out is that there's a chance to be integrated in society, there's a chance to work, and there's a chance to lead somewhat of a fulfilling life, all of which doesn't apply on a small segregated island or in a small whatever segregated camp that you might set up. Because what happens in those cases is that you're taken out of any productive sector and any chance to self-actualize and any chance to socialize with people from your home country or from a very similar culture. So we believe that's very, very bad. What happens when people arrive in these countries with these new safer pathways that you've talked about? Will they still be illegal? They'll most likely be sent back, and they'll probably lead rather unfulfilling lives. Because, first of all, they have... Oh,
you say that they would live unfulfilled lives, even if they got sent back. But if you apply in a war-torn country and wait in a queue for all your life, isn't that worse?
Okay, you keep insisting on the war torn. We do point out that if it's a serious reason and there's a war going on in this country, we will be at least more likely to accept you than we are right now. So we do want to improve this situation. We don't buy into the idea that all people fleeing into the European Union flee from a war-torn country. We believe, on the contrary, that the vast majority of those people are more pushed by economic reasons than by anything else, because they believe in a better life in the European Union, which the vast majority of them does not get. If you're an illegal immigrant in Europe, you don't lead a better life in most of the cases, but you're not accepted in society, you're rather ostracized, you usually are not able to work or earn money, and you're usually not able to communicate with as many people simply because your language isn't spoken as much, and there are not many fellow countrymen and countrywomen. So we don't believe that for most people the situation vastly improves. What do you do in your model? You encourage people to take the step. You say this will be safer, try it. You can do it, see what happens, even though you're fairly sure and fairly aware that there is not like the political capital, not the agreement of people to let more people in, because if that would be the case, you would simply let more people in directly without this step in between. So you're perfectly aware that there's not a consensus to let more people in, but you still want to let them try. What we don't see on our side is how that improves their life situation if you encourage more and more people to take this step. If you encourage more and more people to take a risky trip, maybe evading coast control, maybe knowing that even if you do, there might be a safer way, you might be safe, people might help you out, and you're not risking your life, thereby again encouraging more and more people to go. So what does that mean? First of all, if more and more people go, accidents also do go up. It's not as if the number of migrants is a constant flow, no matter what policy you do. If people are aware that it's easier and safer to get in, more people will come, thus more people will be taken out of their normal life contexts, of their normal situation in their homes, and more people will encourage to do so. A, more people dying on the trip, B, more people being taken out of this context at home. So if we need to weigh those two things, like feeling slightly morally better because some people don't die on a boat, and the invisible number of more and more people trying it, more and more people, like maybe a lower percentage, but an absolute number, more and more people suffering and dying under those conditions, and lastly, more and more people being taken out of their home social networks, their home economies, fleeing under large risk to another country, and then through Europe, and thereby making worse lives for them, then we don't think that's something we need to encourage, and therefore we're very happy to oppose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this motion is very, very, very simple. We want to turn Fort Europe into Port Europe. We want people to come here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by asking you to notice something very, very important that both the Leader of the Opposition and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition brought up. Then I will bring in some rebuttals to their, well, let's call them arguments for argument's sake. Finally, I'm going to bring in some of my own arguments, and finally I'm going to summarize. Now, first of all, what I want you to notice is that the Leader of the Opposition and his assistant said that if we make immigration safer, more people are going to want to do it, which is quite logical, because people are generally risk-averse. If they know that they can come here safely, they're going to want to do it. How is that a bad thing? more people coming here strengthens our economy, strengthens our culture, and makes this a better place to live. That is a good thing, and the leader of the opposition admits it. Now, some rebuttals. Let's begin with why take them here only to reject them again and send them back? I don't buy that. First of all, I don't think that we will be sending many people back, because when we take them here, people will see that this isn't just some problem some way far off on the other side of the world. These are real people, people that need to be cared for, people that need to be let in so that they can live a real and fulfilling life here, not somewhere else. Now, but even assuming that we would send people back, it is safer. It is safer if we, the European Union, or organize these trips back and forth over the Mediterranean, because the current situation is terrible. People are literally drowning. Another rebuttal. The opposition believes that we can solve immigration through reform, visa reform, and you can solve the problem abroad. You can solve the problem where it is. I don't agree with that idea. You cannot have a thorough, a secure, equal asylum-seeking process in a conflict, in a country that is plagued by civil war and conflict, because those situations promote corruption, they promote desperation, promote criminality. So it won't work.
Point of clarification?
Yes.
Do you mean that in a different situation, if they would apply for a visa in an immigration camp, would you have criminality and all these different aspects there as well?
The difference between a refugee camp in a conflict zone and a refugee camp in Europe is the conflict. There is no conflict present. That conflict isn't in Europe. It doesn't promote corruption here, and that it's not a problem. My last rebuttal. The deputy leader of the opposition said that, well, if we stick to what we have now and if we do a little visa reform, at least you'll be rejected in your own country so that you can live a fulfilling life in the meantime. Most people who apply for asylum are victims of war, of civil war, other terms of wars. They do not live fulfilling lives on the side. If they did, they wouldn't be seeking for asylum, yes.
We're not saying that they lead good lives. They're probably very miserable if they flee. What we're saying is that their lives are at least significantly better than the status of an illegal immigrant in Europe. And could you explain why illegal immigrants are so much better off here?
It seems that our definitions of fulfilling lives are very, very separate. Coming here will give them a better chance. Let's just go into my argument, because they're the opposition will find the answers. First of all, let's look at the moral perspective about this. It's not simply to make it safe to cross the ocean. This is part of something much, much greater. The world is plagued by conflicts, and we in Europe have the opportunity to create a safe haven, a sanctuary, where people can come to escape from war, from poverty, from all the ailments that plague this planet. They can come here. We have the possibility to create something like that, and it is a moral imperative to do it. Secondly, it is the purpose, it is the ideal of the European Union to be just that, a safe haven, a place free from war.
Clarification.
Yes?
Would you put any limits on migration then, if migration is solved?
Definitely not, but obviously you still need control of the regulations in some forms, but we believe that creating a port Europe will shift this debate from having a very strict, a very restrictive giving of asylum. It would shift focus from being very strict to being very generous. It would literally be taking people here, giving them a chance. It would be giving the citizens of the European Union a chance to see the problem in reality. It would clarify that this isn't something going on in a faraway place. This is real people. This is our brothers and sisters who are suffering, and we need to let them in. Secondly, I want to talk about the practical aspects of this. We all know that immigration strengthens our economy, and we need immigration to face the demographic challenge of our aging population. We also need legal pathways so that when people come here, they're off to a good start immediately. Not only that they are well integrated into the economy, but also to make sure that they do not come to crime, that they are not forced to seek out crime in order to sustain their living here in Europe. And let's stay on crime for a minute, because as we've heard before, illegal immigration promotes crime, not only in the sense that people come here and then they are not integrated in society and are forced to live off crime. Immigrants are victims of human trafficking, of kidnapping. They are used for extortion, which in turn finance other criminal activities. And a port of Europe would seriously hamper criminal activities around the Mediterranean. For all of these reasons and many more, we are proud to propose.
Turning Port Europe into Port Europe, but more likely they will create a fort inside the port, trapping people inside it. And they have failed to explain how this would improve the situation. They would rather trap the people in new refugee camps rather than have them in refugee camps back in their old countries. This system has been tried already. We have hundreds of refugee camps all over the west of the Middle East and east of Africa, and people are there applying for asylum and they're not getting it. Why would the situation improve just because they do the same thing in a fort, in a camp here inside of Europe? But I will start by rebutting a few of the points brought up by the government. First, they state that the immigrants are good for society and that they provide all sorts of economic growth and cultural development for the countries in Europe. But then they have to, no thank you, they have to realize that there's a difference between skilled labor immigration and economic refugees, as we're mostly talking about in this context. Skilled labor can be very useful for the countries that help these people get in, but economic refugees require enormous amounts of money to be able to integrate these people into the society. And we think that there are far more effective ways of spending this money to help people in their own countries instead of bringing them here by boat, and then maybe they can apply for an asylum and get one in these camps and go to a country in Europe. They also suggest that it will be easier to apply for a visa in these refugee camps instead of in their home country, as there is no conflict there. But these immigration camps can barely be considered as living inside of Europe. You're not living inside of Europe if you're living in an immigration camp many miles on an island outside of Europe. And they haven't addressed all the issues that people living in these camps are faced, already brought up by the first two speakers, or one speaker of the opposition. We have health issues, we have a huge ratio of criminality, and yes, please.
Now, going back to your point that this is just another refugee process center, don't you consider it as the point of these centers as safe havens? Don't you consider that they provide safety to the people that go through this method? They could go to other centers, as you say, and do the same thing, but they're coming through this way.
Yes, thank you. So. Exactly, they can go to different centers, to camps in the Middle East or in Africa instead, and we wouldn't have to make the efforts to bring them here into Europe. Instead of spending lots of money on bringing these people on boats and get them to an island in Europe, we can instead use that money to help them in these camps, and we will use the money a lot more effectively and efficiently. No thank you. Under your proposal, there will be two different options. Either people will stay in these camps and they will not be granted an asylum, and these camps will be permanent and people will be staying there and we will get an increased inflow of people that will be living there forever, as we see in refugee camps already today. In Africa and in the Middle East, people are staying there, and these settlements become permanent, and people stay there without any prospect of getting a job, and they're living off funds from organizations such as the UN, which is no thank you, which is not a way of them, and there's no way for them of fulfilling their life, getting a job, or sustaining themselves. It's just a huge waste of human life. And no thank you. Secondly, they would, if they would be granted asylum into our countries, which is the other option, we would have, and if countries in Europe would like to have more economic immigrants, we will already have them here. So obviously, the countries of Europe are not interested in having more economic refugees in our countries. And suppose we would force the countries of Europe to attract and to have more immigrants, economic immigrants here, what will we get? We will get huge amounts of immigrants that would just face unemployment because we have not chosen to get them here, and we have no ways of taking care of them in a sufficient way for them to feel well. And we will get further stigmatization of these groups. We will have immigrants without a job, living in suburbs, being the poorest part of society. We would have, as part of that, increased racism, and it will be bad for the economy as we have to fund these people. And eventually, also nationalism will grow as people are, and the people here in Europe will face worse prospects of living good lives themselves. The economy would be worse. No, thank you. And it would actually be as a direct consequence of having too many people here, too many immigrants in Europe. Because I said we have to differ between skilled economic immigration and economic refugees, as in this case. If the countries in Europe can support more immigrants, we encourage them, and we also think, as already put forward by the first speaker of the opposition, that we should grant more refugees asylum in our countries and really try to make an effort into having more immigrants, as many as we could. But we should not force the countries of Europe to accept more immigrants than they can handle. We, the countries in Europe, should be the ones that decide how many immigrants we can support, and forcing the countries to accept more immigrants than they could support is not good for anyone. It's not good for the immigrants, and it's not good for the people living here. And so we reject this motion and all the points brought forward. Thank you.
Now, the interesting thing here is that the opposition seems to miss the absolute core of the case here, namely that people are drowning in the Mediterranean oceans because they have to rely on unsafe methods to cross it. The question here is, how do we solve that? Now, I'm going to give 4 points tonight, and my rebuttal will be integrated. Now, first of all, how do we solve the issue of asylum seekers and what is best for them? Secondly, why is immigration in the European Union currently not as successful as it could be? Thirdly, how do we solve the issue of integration? And lastly, if we do have time, how do we incentivize ourselves and the international community to solve the conflicts that causes people to flee in the first place? Now, on to the issue of asylum seekers. Ladies and gentlemen, no one wants to be an illegal immigrant. No one wants to be forced to leave their home, abandon friends and family, and travel across the entire world using unsafe methods, ended up being in debt to, traffickers for fun. No one does this without a very good reason. You don't go through all that effort just because you feel like it, ladies and gentlemen. And the thing is, as we've said, swift and secure methods to grant people passage across the ocean would be used because that is one of the issues. We do not agree with innocent people drowning because they want to get a better life. We believe that, sure, we'll ensure your passage across the ocean, then we'll process your application while you're there safe and secure, not dying from bombs or drowning. You're in this island, you are safe and secure, and most importantly, you are alive. Now, as we've said, And especially as pointed out by Simon previously, we have a moral obligation to these people. The responsibility to protect is recognized by the United Nations. We're just really bad at living up to it. And the European Union especially has been devoted to democratization and human rights for very long times. Notice the phrase human rights here, ladies and gentlemen. It has very little to do with geography and much more to do with people. And as I've said, almost all of the people who go through this effort of moving across half the world without, all of the resources, they're not exactly getting on a plane and getting off. It's not a holiday trip, it's actual effort. Most of them are very, very likely to have legit reasons for doing so. We believe that most of the people that will process a visa are going to end up getting asylum. It's not going to be a long list of people that are sent back, without hesitation. Now, what we've heard from them is that these people can apply in an embassy. Guess what's not a good corruption? Guess what's not a good combination? Bureaucracy and civil war. And neither is corruption, if you were to throw that in there as I wanted to. And also they said that people will still want to be illegal and still use human traffickers. Why would they? People want to be alive. They want to be safe and secure and knowing that them and their kids are going to wake up alive the next morning and not having to fear for their lives. What this island will do is that it will allow them to stay safe and protected during the process of bureaucracy. On to my second point, immigration and European Union. Okay, go for it.
Why do you think that putting people on this island would increase the chance of the countries in Europe granting them asylum as compared to having them in refugee camps?
Because they're not sworn by illegal immigrants that sort of take up the space and makes it, a bad attitude towards immigrants in the first place. Now, concerning the European Union and its immigration laws, they are vastly outdated. They were created when conflicts happened within Europe, which they've since then managed to solve. The process of seeking asylum is a very complex and long one. It takes time. And the thing is, while it's all lovely if they would be able to safely apply at an embassy, this is an absolute emergency. People are dying right now. We can't wait for separate natures to go through the entire process of, passing bills that will allow for them to sort of open up their embassies and their separate applications. We need to act now. We can't wait for politicians to take action. And we've heard that the flow will suddenly grow massively. The thing is, the flow is massive. The only thing that will change is that the people who are currently sneaking in and the ones who are dying in the Mediterranean will instead be processed legally. That is the one big change that's going to happen. No, thank you. And yes, somehow from the opposition side, they seem to believe that institutions and organizations operating in Africa and in the Middle East are just as functioning and well organized and free from corruption as they are within Europe. This is absolutely false, ladies and gentlemen. The thing is, first of all, are the buildings standing? If the building is not standing, you can't apply there. If there's corrupt people there, you're going to end up in debt in any way. Thirdly, moving on to my third point then, integration. First of all, if you're allowed into a country, you're much more likely to be willing to become an active part of it because it welcomed you when you were in need. You are indebted to that country, you're more likely to want to work to pay it off. And also, since the need for using smugglers and so on will disappear, as we've proven several times on our side of the house, crime rates would be reduced. Why? Because people have to pay smugglers back. That is why people, once they get to Europe, revert to using crimes, revert to prostitution, because they have an immediate debt to pay unless they want to be killed by smugglers. And since there would be no need to use smugglers, this would disappear. And also, knowing who they are, these people who come to our nation and are most likely welcome here, makes it easier to target efforts to reach them. It makes it easier to find them jobs and, exposing them to language and make sure that they actually have a house. And we need a workforce. Especially economic refugees are most likely to want to come here to actually do the work. That's the reason why they went here in the first place. What we heard from them is that they won't be integrated. We've mentioned several reasons why they would, why this would actually be made easier. And we've heard that nationalism will grow. If nationalism does grow, we'll deal with it. Just because some people are protectionist idiots does not mean that we should let people live in misery or drown. That is something that we'll deal with, just as we deal with any other sort of extremist ideology that pops up. Lastly, briefly, why we would be incentivized to work on these issues instead of just ignoring them. Now, we know there are huge problems in the world, but they are over there. We can conveniently ignore them and talk about them and feel good about oh, that's not happening there, we'll send humanitarian aid maybe sometime. When the problem is on your doorstep, when it's your neighbor that's been affected, when it's people you know who have suffered from this, you're much more likely to care because the problem is here. It's not just over there, and it's much more difficult to ignore when it happens to someone you know. And also, the international community needs to work harder to aid in solving these conflicts. And again, having people who have experienced it here will give them a voice and give them a possibility to talk about these issues and to have people listen. For all of these reasons, we are incredibly proud to propose.
Hello everybody, and thank you for listening. I will explain to you why the model of the government is completely flawed and it will not work, and why they have failed to solve the problems with immigration, and why the ludicrous idea of that if we just let everyone into Europe they will have a much better life and we will help so many people is just wrong. First of all, let's go to the clash in model and we'll compare the opposition's model with the government model. Now the government wants to put all of these immigrants who come across the Mediterranean in a huge camp, and somehow that will be more humane putting them in a camp than our model, where we encourage them not to cross the Mediterranean, where we have increased presence of embassies and administration in Northern Africa, so they can safely seek asylum or visas from there, instead of going to a camp where we're taking everybody to, taking everybody to a camp. And you cannot deny the fact that some people will have their applications rejected. We're not going to take in every single immigrant, so that camp won't be, filled and then all of the immigrants released into Europe. Some will be rejected, some will have to send back. So why create a system where you ship people across the Mediterranean only for them to be stored indefinitely, and then when their applications get denied, send them back to North Africa, instead of having a system where they can safely apply in North Africa? Yes.
Now, do you recognize that my security is more threatened if I'm in a place such as, say, Egypt in Northern Africa, or if I'm on a small island outside the coast of Italy?
I don't buy that. As example, the leader of the opposition has already stated that when you keep people in isolation, there are problems with squalor, there are problems with passivity, they are taken away from a regular context, a regular society where they work, instead putting in a camp somewhere desolate with no communication with the rest of the world. I do not believe that that is better than being in North Africa in semi-functioning countries like Libya, like Tunisia, like Egypt, where they can still work. But anyway, and the fact that some will be rejected means that you are not solving the problems with smugglers, with illegal immigration across the Mediterranean. Because as you have already stated, the people who are desperate will take any means to get into Europe. And if they know that they will be rejected, which some of them will, because your model does not even include the economic refugees, some of them will be rejected, and we will still have the problem with illegal immigrants and the smugglers, because some of them will still contract smugglers to take them across the Mediterranean. So not only does your model stash people in inhumane camp, but it does not even solve the problem of people drowning in the Mediterranean. And secondly, to the second clash of the debate, whether immigration is good or bad, the second team of the government comes out and says that, well, more people will be encouraged to come to Europe. Well, that is a great thing, because everything in Europe is in utopia, and they come here and live great and happy lives and get jobs and everything, while completely ignoring the fact that we already have socioeconomic problems with the immigrants that we have in Europe. Not all immigrants are unemployed and don't get jobs and are a problem. Immigrants are good. Yes, they are needed to solve some demographic and economic issues. But Europe has already immigrants through the systems that we already have, and taking in more immigrants will not help to solve the socioeconomic issues that we already have with immigrants. It will not help especially not since Europe is in an economic crisis where we cannot afford to take in more. So, in a summary, we have a government a split government for that one, because one wants to put the immigrants in camps, while the other one wants just free borders and let everyone in. The government that wants to put them in camps completely ignores that it fails to solve the problem with immigration over the Mediterranean. No, thank you, both of you. It fails to solve the problem of illegal immigration across the Mediterranean, while also putting people in inhumane camps. And the second team of the government fails to see that free immigration, fails to see the problems with completely unrestricted free immigration that they seem to propose. Yes?
Could you explain how doing nothing are going to help the people drowning in the Mediterranean right now?
Our model will encourage people to seek asylum in North Africa. We will have increased, as Per already said, there will be increased presence there will be increased bureaucratic presence in North Africa, increased opportunities for immigrants to be able to seek asylum and visas from North Africa. They will come to North Africa, they will have a legal process where their case is handled while they are working, while they are obviously working in North Africa. Our old model also proposed, instead of spending money on internment camps and shipping people across the Mediterranean, we can spend the money in the conflict zones themselves. Anyway, as you have clearly seen, the model of the government is flawed. It does not include all the immigrants. It does not solve the problems. And the government has also failed to prove that unrestricted immigration is good for Europe, and there are no problems associated with it. Therefore, as you might know who the winner might be, O to the P, oppose. Thank you.